we should not be surprised that everything is connected. And in this short presentation, I'm going to try and draw a thread for you through space, through time, and linked to the environment and the essence of being human. So quite a lot of big-scale intentions here in a very short space of time. But hopefully, I'll help you distinguish between the whole and the parts, and also draw some links between what we can do as nations versus individuals, and also in the context of our daily lives in business, and as individual human beings as part of civil society. When I show you this slide, I ask you, what does this evoke in you immediately? If you're a tourist or a nature lover, probably a sense of beauty, spiritual feelings, wonderment. Elephants are known for wonderful long memories and care of each other. If you're a trophy hunter, you might see a trophy. If you're a trader in ivory, or if you're funding your wars in Chad, you might see some cash. If you are someone living in the rural districts of Zimbabwe, you might see a crop raider, or an animal that has recently killed one of your kin. And this, I think, is just to remind ourselves that value systems make us look at the world very differently. And that's the way it will always be. We won't all look at this picture in the same way. In the background, there's Mount Kilimanjaro. You see the ice cap slowly, or just perched on the top. That's much smaller than those who would have visited this place 30 years ago. And this is our link to what has now been established as incontrovertible fact. Climate change is happening, global warming is happening as a result of human action. And in the language of science, this is fact. There's over 95% certainty that humans are the cause of this warming. To show you a single graph, without getting too technical about it, we're looking on the horizontal axis at a time scale of 420,000 years. This is work that was done on the Vostok ice core. And basically what this shows you is the parts per million in terms of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere at any particular time. So if you move from left to right, you see it cycles constantly between about 180 parts per million, but never over 300 parts per million. Remember that when we get to 100,000 years before present, this is where modern humans start. This is where our great-great-great-grandparents were wandering the plains of Africa 100,000 years ago. So this is a very long time scale. And then in the blink of an eye, carbon dioxide densities in the atmosphere just shoot up. At the start of the industrial age, this is a shot up. And the width of that line is exaggerated so you can see it, but on this time scale, you should not actually be able to see it because it's such a thin little slice. I think this is the single most comprehensive piece of evidence to show and to link this to the fact that humans are causing climate change. So climate change is beginning to destabilize climate systems. And we see across the world, in every continent on the world, a frequency of extreme weather events increasing in various different forms, from droughts to famine, all the way through to floods and hurricane damage. The ecological systems that are there to protect us no longer have the buffering systems, the buffering capacity, because of overdevelopment or unwise development. The consequence of this, just to give you one example, in terms of agricultural productivity and the projections into the next 30 years or so, shows us this pattern. So when you see pale or dark green, you're looking at productivity increases as a result of the changing climate. And where you see pink and red, you see decreases. In the red zones, up to 50% decrease by 2050 in agricultural yields. But what I really want you to see here is the disproportionate impact that climate change will have on the South and the developing nations, as opposed to the North, where developed economies have built their vibrant economies on the back of this carbon that's gone into the atmosphere and that is busy impacting on us so heavily. So we have the facts. Leaders of countries sit together but cannot come to an agreement. The North does not want to let go of its privilege, and the South wants to also develop and emit carbon in a fast-track way to achieve that development. There's an ethical dilemma here, clearly, and who can deny the South its right to develop? We've got the world in our hands, we as human beings. At the national level, at the level of governments, apparently we haven't got the political will to do what we need to do. We could even say that we have the world on our fingertips. It is a very, very fragile world. When I show you this slide, and just to bring this down now to the more individual level, away from this helplessness that one might feel in relation to governments and leaders not taking the right decisions. What does this evoke in one? Well, if you're a keen hiker or rock climber, this might represent an opportunity, a place where you can recreate. If you are from some of our indigenous communities, this could represent a rich heritage of your history in the form of rock paintings. But when I look at this, over and above those types of images that it evokes in me, when I look at this, I see, to put it bluntly, a water factory, a cow that delivers water. These are the areas that we need to look after. And in South Africa, WWF has recently, with the CSIR, established that 50% of South Africa's water is generated on only 8% of our land. These are the blue areas. So if you were in a soccer team, and we have a former Bafana captain later on, if you're in a soccer team, if one of your players had to do 50%, half of the work on the field, this is what these blue areas are doing for water in South Africa. Unfortunately, many of these areas also run in parallel with some of the biggest coal deposits. And there's clearly a conflict. When you look at coal mining and the way in which it goes about its business, we need coal. 95+% of our energy, electricity, is generated from burning coal, which also results in carbon emissions. When you look from left to right here, just let's not focus on too much detail. Left to right here is across the time scales from the construction phase of a mine to the mining to the post-mining phase. When you look at the different impacts on water resources here, you realize that the post-mining period is actually where most of the damage happens. And when we talk post-mining, we're talking 30, 50, 60, 80 years after mine closure. You then get systems that get left behind that look as follows. This might look quite beautiful in turquoise, but this is pretty much a dead river system. There's not a single dragonfly or a michi in any of these systems. Every individual in South Africa needs clean water. Every business, just about every business is built on the availability of water. We as individuals, if our leaders and our nations don't make the right decisions, have the ability to make consumer choices that are wise. We can shift things. We've got to be very, very clear about it. And when we start looking at a number of individuals making the same kind of choices, you get the power of the Arab Spring. You get an awakening and a movement that shifts governments and leadership that is not standing up and being counted. So, from the individual perspective, each one of us is like a little drop of dew on a spider web. Our individual actions are very modest. The decisions that we make about daily decisions in terms of what we buy, what we drive, where we go on holiday, who we associate with, is like little droplets that team up to form raging torrents, as in the Arab Spring. We either can see ourselves as hanging together or falling together. Thank you very much.